In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a routine HOA inspection turned violent when two enforcers assaulted Sarah Thompson, only for her husband, a decorated Marine veteran, to unleash a fierce retaliation that left the aggressors battered and the community reeling. Sarah Thompson stood in her front yard on a sunny Saturday morning, watering her rose bushes. At 38, she was a high school history teacher, known for her warm smile and knack for keeping her classroom engaged. Her husband, David Thompson, a 40-year-old Marine veteran, was inside their modest two-story home in the Willow Creek subdivision, a planned community in suburban Atlanta. The Thompsons had moved here 2 years ago, drawn by the quiet streets and good schools for their two kids, Emma, 10, and Liam, 7. But the neighborhood's homeowners association had become a growing source of frustration. The HOA, led by a zealous president named Margaret Hensley, enforced strict rules on everything from lawn height to mailbox colors. Sarah and David had received multiple notices about minor infractions: a slightly faded mailbox, a few weeds in the flower bed, even a basketball hoop that was an inch too low. David, who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and now worked as a mechanic, had little patience for what he called petty bureaucracy. Sarah, more diplomatic, handled the HOA's complaints, trying to keep the peace. That morning, Sarah noticed a white SUV parked across the street. 2 men, both in their early 30s, stepped out, wearing polo shirts with the HOA's logo. One was tall and lanky, with thinning blonde hair and a clipboard, Greg Miller, the HOA's compliance officer. The other, shorter and stockier with a buzz cut, was Tom Carver, a volunteer enforcer known for his aggressive approach. Sarah sighed, setting down her watering can. She'd dealt with Greg before, but Tom was new, and his reputation for confrontations preceded him. Greg approached first, his clipboard raised like a shield. "Mrs. Thompson, we're here about the mailbox again. It's still not up to code, and your lawn's got some patches that need attention." Sarah kept her tone polite but firm. "We repainted the mailbox last month, Greg. It matches the approved color. And the lawn's fine. We've had a dry spell. I'll get to it this weekend." Tom stepped forward, his arms crossed. "That's not good enough. The rules are clear. You've had warnings. We're issuing a fine today, and if it's not fixed by Monday, it's another one." Sarah frowned, her patience thinning. "A fine? For what? The mailbox is fine, and the lawn's not even bad. This is ridiculous." Tom's face reddened. "Don't talk back, lady. You signed the HOA agreement when you moved here. Follow the rules or pay the price." Sarah took a step back, her hands on her hips. "I'm not paying a fine for a mailbox that's already compliant. You need to check your records." Greg scribbled something on his clipboard, avoiding her gaze. Tom, however, leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're special? We've got a whole neighborhood to keep in line. You don't get to pick and choose." Sarah held her ground. "I'm not arguing with you. If you have an issue, send it in writing like you're supposed to. Now, please leave my property." Tom's eyes narrowed. "You don't tell us what to do." Without warning, he shoved Sarah, his hand hitting her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. She caught herself on the grass, shock flashing across her face. Before she could respond, Tom grabbed her arm, yanking her up. Sarah yelped, trying to pull free, but Greg stepped in, pushing her back down with a hand to her chest. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and she fell to her knees, clutching her side. Inside the house, David was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when he heard Sarah's cry. He dropped the mug, the ceramic shattering on the tile. He ran to the front door, his heart pounding. David had seen combat, lost friends, and carried scars both visible and invisible. He'd sworn to protect his family, and the sound of Sarah in distress triggered something primal in him. He burst onto the porch, taking in the scene. Sarah on the ground, her face pale, holding her side, while Greg and Tom stood over her, Greg looking nervous and Tom defiant. David's voice was low, controlled, but laced with fury. "Get away from my wife. Now." Tom turned, smirking. "This doesn't concern you, buddy. HOA business. Go back inside." David stepped off the porch, his 6-foot frame taut with muscle from years of military training. His dark hair was cropped short, his green eyes blazing. "You put your hands on her. That makes it my business." Sarah struggled to her feet, her voice shaking. "David, they pushed me. I told them to leave. And they—" Tom cut her off. "She was non-compliant. We're doing our job." He took a step toward David, puffing out his chest. David's fists clenched. "Last chance. Walk away." Greg tugged at Tom's arm. "Come on, man, let's go. This isn't worth it." But Tom wasn't backing down. He swung at David, a clumsy punch aimed at his jaw. David's training kicked in. He sidestepped, grabbed Tom's wrist, and twisted it hard, forcing him to his knees. Tom grunted in pain, but before he could recover, David drove his fist into Tom's nose. Blood sprayed, and Tom crumpled, clutching his face. Greg panicked, rushing at David with his clipboard raised like a weapon. David caught his arm mid-swing, yanking him forward and landing a sharp jab to Greg's cheek. Greg staggered back, his glasses askew, blood trickling from a split lip. The fight was over in seconds, both men on the ground, groaning. Sarah grabbed David's arm. "David, stop. They're down. It's over." David's chest heaved, his eyes still locked on the two men. He wanted to keep going, to make sure they never came near his family again, but Sarah's voice pulled him back. He stepped away, helping her to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softening. "I'm bruised, but I'll be fine," Sarah said, wincing as she touched her side. "We need to call the police." David nodded, pulling out his phone. Neighbors were already gathering, drawn by the commotion. Some whispered, others stared, but no one intervened. The white SUV was still parked across the street, its HOA logo glaring under the sunlight. The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers and a patrol car. They took statements from Sarah, David, and a few neighbors who'd seen the altercation. Greg and Tom, still dazed, tried to spin the story, claiming Sarah had been aggressive and David had attacked them unprovoked. But the neighbors' accounts backed the Thompsons. One, an older woman named Mrs. Carter, had seen Tom shove Sarah from her window. Another, a father named Brian, confirmed David had only acted after the men assaulted his wife. The officers handcuffed Greg and Tom, charging them with assault. Sarah declined an ambulance, but agreed to go to urgent care later to check for bruising or worse. David stayed by her side, his jaw tight, his anger barely contained. The police warned him to stay out of trouble, noting his military background but also the clear evidence of self-defense. As the patrol car drove away, Margaret Hensley, the HOA president, arrived on the scene. She was in her late 50s, with tightly curled blonde hair and a perpetually pinched expression. She approached Sarah and David, her arms crossed. "This is unacceptable," she said. "You've caused a scene, and now 2 of our compliance officers are in custody. We'll be addressing this at the next board meeting." David stepped forward, his voice cold. "Your compliance officers attacked my wife. You're lucky I didn't do worse. If you come after us, you'll regret it." Margaret's face paled, but she didn't back down. "The HOA has rules, Mr. Thompson. You can't just—" "Save it," Sarah cut in, her voice steady despite the pain in her side. "We're done with your threats. You want to talk rules? How about assault? We'll see you in court if we have to." Margaret stormed off, muttering about fines and legal action. The neighbors dispersed, some offering sympathetic nods, others avoiding eye contact. Sarah and David went inside, where Emma and Liam were waiting, wide-eyed. Sarah reassured them, downplaying her bruises, while David called his brother-in-law, a lawyer, to start preparing for whatever the HOA might throw at them. At urgent care, Sarah was diagnosed with bruised ribs and a sprained shoulder. The doctor prescribed rest and painkillers, warning her to take it easy. David drove her home, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He blamed himself for not being outside sooner, for letting the HOA's nonsense escalate. Sarah reached over, squeezing his hand. "You protected me," she said. "That's what matters." Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some residents sided with the Thompsons, fed up with the HOA's overreach. Others, loyal to Margaret, spread rumors that Sarah had provoked the incident. David and Sarah received a formal letter from the HOA, demanding payment for fines related to the mailbox and lawn, plus a new citation for disorderly conduct. David crumpled the letter, tossing it into the trash. Their lawyer, Mark, advised them to file a civil suit against Greg, Tom, and the HOA for assault and harassment. He also suggested a restraining order against the two men. David wanted to push harder, to dismantle the HOA entirely, but Sarah urged caution. "We need to be smart about this," she said. "Let's hit them where it hurts, legally." Mark dug into the HOA's records, uncovering a pattern of questionable fines and aggressive enforcement tactics. Other residents came forward with similar stories: unwarranted citations, threats of liens, even intimidation. One neighbor, a single mom named Lisa, said Tom had banged on her door at night over a non-compliant porch light. Another, an elderly man named Mr. Patel, had been fined for a birdhouse that wasn't pre-approved. The Thompsons realized they weren't alone in their frustration. The civil suit moved forward, with Sarah and David as the lead plaintiffs in a class action case against the HOA. The neighborhood divided further, some residents joining the lawsuit, others defending Margaret's leadership. Greg and Tom faced criminal charges, their court dates looming. David heard through a neighbor that Tom had a history of bar fights, which explained his quick temper, but didn't excuse his actions. Sarah's bruises faded, but the emotional toll lingered. She jumped at loud noises, and David noticed her checking the windows at night. He installed security cameras around the house, his military instincts on high alert. Emma and Liam picked up on their parents' tension, asking questions Sarah struggled to answer without scaring them. David took them to the park, trying to keep things normal, but his mind was on the fight ahead. The HOA board meeting was held 2 weeks later in the community center. Sarah and David attended, flanked by Mark and a dozen supportive neighbors. Margaret ran the meeting with her usual authority, but her voice wavered when Sarah stood to speak. "You let your enforcers attack me," Sarah said, her voice clear. "You've bullied this neighborhood for too long. We're not paying your fines, and we're not backing down." The room erupted in murmurs, some in agreement, others in protest. David stood beside Sarah, his presence commanding silence. "You sent those men to our home," he said. "They hurt my wife. If you think we're the problem, try us." Margaret tried to regain control, but the tide was turning. Several board members, uncomfortable with the lawsuit's implications, suggested an internal review of the HOA's practices. By the end of the meeting, Margaret agreed to suspend fines pending an investigation, a small victory for the Thompsons. The lawsuit gained traction over the next few months. Mark uncovered financial discrepancies in the HOA's accounts. Funds from fines funneled into questionable expenses, including payments to Greg and Tom for consulting. The evidence was damning, and Margaret's leadership came under scrutiny. She resigned before the case went to trial, replaced by a new president who promised reform. Greg and Tom pleaded guilty to reduced charges, receiving probation and community service. The civil suit ended with a settlement. The HOA paid damages to Sarah and other affected residents, and new bylaws were drafted to limit enforcement powers. The Thompsons used their share of the settlement to fund a college savings account for Emma and Liam. Life in Willow Creek slowly returned to normal, but Sarah and David never fully trusted the HOA again. They kept their lawn pristine and their mailbox perfect, not out of fear but to avoid giving anyone an excuse. David trained at the gym harder, channeling his anger into discipline. Sarah started a neighborhood watch group, turning her pain into action. One evening, as they sat on their porch, Sarah leaned against David.
"We did it," she said.
"We fought back." David nodded, his arm around her. "And we'll keep fighting. No one touches my family." The roses in their yard bloomed brighter that spring, a quiet testament to their resilience. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they defended it together.